Cuisinart presents Patently Easy Food Processor Cooking with your host, Greg Patton.
Hi, I'm Greg Patton, and welcome to my kitchen. On today's show, I'll be doing food processor pasta, including a basic recipe that you make right in your machine with the machine kneading the dough. Also a recipe where you can use the food processor pasta attachment. And I'll also be making an Italian meat sauce with beef, chicken, and ham, and an Oriental dish, a cold one, spicy noodles with chicken. If you've never made your own homemade pasta, you have a real treat coming to you because the food processor does such a super job of making it. I'm going to do it two ways. Once where the machine kneads the dough, and the other way with the food processor attachment for pasta, making the dough. With the metal blade in place, put 2 cups of flour and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and of course you can leave the salt out if you wish, a tablespoon of water, and a tablespoon of oil right into the work bowl. And then you start the motor and add through the feed tube 3 large eggs. And within about 15 seconds or so, the mixture in the work bowl should almost be gathering into a ball. And if it doesn't gather into a ball, don't worry about it, because you can always adjust the consistency with a little bit more water, just a few drops at a time. And you want this to almost gather into a ball, but not necessarily quite. You want some pieces of dough, as you can see here, moving around the work bowl, and you don't want this pasta to be moving freely at this point. Basically, what you want to do up to now is just to adjust the moisture content. Take the metal blade out, and then turn this mixture out onto a sheet of wax paper. And then I'll show you what you do with it then. You see, we haven't really done any kneading up to this point. The metal blade goes back in. Squeeze this mixture together with your hands, and it should feel nice and moist. What I want to do is to squeeze this and then stick my finger right into the middle of it, as I'm doing now. And then as I pull my finger out, you see, nothing is sticking to the finger. This should be a dry hole, so to speak. Then you cut this pasta mixture up into walnut-sized pieces, because the real effort of the machine now is going to come into play, and we're going to use processor power to actually knead this dough. If you were doing this by hand, you would have to squeeze this dough between your hands or on a board for about 15 minutes to develop the gluten. And we're going to have the processor do it in about less than a minute. So with the metal blade in place and the motor on, drop these walnut-sized pieces through the feed tube, just one right after the other. And now you want this dough to form a ball. And so you wait a few seconds. And if it doesn't form a ball, then add a little bit of water. And then once it forms a ball, you want this to knead. See, it's forming a ball right now with just a few stray pieces. Then you want to let this knead for 1 full minute. After the dough has kneaded for 1 minute, then remove it from the work bowl, being careful of the metal blade, and always use the plastic scraper and not your fingers to clean the blade. And then we'll press this together. The dough feels warm. It's very elastic. It's very smooth, and you see it's not sticking at all to my hands. Now, just let me leave this here for 1 minute. And then here I have some dough that I made earlier. And I want you to see how supple. You see how very stretchy this is? Okay, this has sat for at least 30 minutes, and that's exactly what you want to happen. Whereas this freshly made dough, you see, when I try to stretch it, it's very, very tough, and it starts to tear. So just compare these two. This very supple dough that's been sitting here for at least 30 minutes, and then this freshly made dough. And the difference is just absolutely amazing. Be sure that you let the dough become really supple and smooth before you start to work with it. So I'm going to get both of these doughs just out of the way, wrap them in plastic wrap, and let them sit at room temperature until you're ready to work with them. And then you have a choice of either rolling the dough out by hand or using a hand crank pasta maker. And so if you're going to use the hand crank pasta maker, divide the dough into 8 pieces, lightly dust it with flour, and then adjust the setting to the widest setting, and then crank the dough through. And then decrease the setting 1 notch or 2 notches and crank it through again. And what you keep doing is simply decreasing the thickness of the dough each time. And here's a strip that has passed through several times, and I'm going to pass it through now for its last time. And so from one little piece of dough, you see, you have a nice long strip of pasta just like that. And then you can, of course, cut this in half if you don't want your pasta to be very long. I also have a strip here of spinach pasta, and I'll tell you how to make that in just a minute. Once you've cranked the dough out to its proper thickness, then you adjust the pasta maker to cut the dough for you into strips. And so you coax this in. See what's happening here? This is getting cut into little linguine. And this spinach pasta is made the same way as the basic pasta, except I used 1 cup of spinach and 2 cups of flour and no water. I'm going to do fettuccine right now. And 2 eggs, because spinach has a lot of moisture. So this is how it goes, and I'm going to just leave it right there. Now, this is a lot of fun, but I think what's even more fun and what saves you even more time is to make pasta with a food processor attachment. And to do that, you put 3 cups of flour in the work bowl with a metal blade. And I should point out to you that not all food processor manufacturers and not all manufacturers of one model food processor make pasta attachments for all their machines. So you should check to see what is available for your particular machine. Put 3 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, and 4 eggs in the work bowl, and turn the motor on. And you want to let this run for about 15 seconds. And unlike the dough that I just made, this method of making pasta will not give you a dough. You will get a granular mixture. And you do not want a dough to form. You want these granules to form instead. You let this process for about 30 seconds total. And if the mixture looks too dry, you just add a little bit of water through the feed tube, or about a teaspoon or so at a time, making sure that this mixture does not gather into a dough. It gathers into a mixture that looks something like coarse cornmeal. And when you pinch it together between your fingers like that, it holds. So that tells you that this is moist enough. So to make pasta with the pasta maker, you just put your pasta attachment on. And this is so much fun. And you take the granules and you scoop the granules out into the hopper. And most pasta makers will give you a choice of attachments to use. And since I'm using the machine, and since I have the option of making something other than fettuccine linguine, I'm going to be doing some macaroni. So you just push this granular mixture down through the chute, and when you use the tool that's provided for the machine to push the granules down, and you see you have granules instead of a dough because this is an extrusion apparatus. There they come. And so there's no kneading. The kneading is actually done as the macaroni comes out, or whatever kind of pasta you happen to be making. I just want to do a little sampling for you, because just to show you how much fun this is, and also how fast it is to make something like macaroni in your own kitchen. There. So that's how you make pasta with a food processor, whether you choose to have the machine knead the dough for you and then roll the dough out by hand, or a hand crank machine, or you choose to use the pasta maker. A traditional bolognese sauce has meat and tomatoes that are cooked together for a long, long time. My bolognese sauce probably shouldn't even be called bolognese because it's very untraditional. It has beef, chicken, and ham, and very finely chopped vegetables, and also tomatoes. To start making it, you have the metal blade in place, turn the motor on, and then drop a clove of garlic through the feed tube. Follow that with a small onion that you've cut into quarters. This is the easiest way I know of to mince vegetables. Use the pusher to help the vegetables through. A small carrot weighing 2 ounces that you've cut into 3 pieces. And then a celery stalk weighing about 2 ounces that you've cut into 1-inch chunks. And you just drop these vegetables one right after the other through the feed tube, and then you just keep processing until you hear no more chopping sounds. There. And that way you will know that your vegetables are finely minced, which is exactly what you want. I used to do this sauce years ago without the food processor, and now I only do it with the processor because with these finely chopped vegetables, it will take a long, long time to achieve this texture with just a knife. So you scrape all of these vegetables then out of the work bowl into a large skillet or saucepan. This happens to be a 12-inch skillet. And you cook the vegetables in 2 tablespoons of butter. First stir everything around so that the vegetables are coated with the butter. Cook this over a medium heat, and then cover the skillet and let it cook for about 10 minutes or so, stirring occasionally until the vegetables are tender. Then with the metal blade in place, add 2 ounces of ham that you've cut into 1-inch chunks, and this can be smoked ham or it can just be boiled ham, either leftover or something special that you bought. And then you pulse this about 5 or 6 times. Just until the ham is finely chopped. And if there's, I see there's a chunk that I see didn't get chopped, so we just keep pulsing once or twice more. And then, after the vegetables have cooked for the 10 minutes, you empty the ham into the skillet. And then stir it well. Make sure that you stir everything together well. Cover the skillet and let things keep cooking for another few minutes. And this is a very, very pretty mixture already, and it is also smelling quite good right now. So, while the vegetables and ham cook, reinsert the metal blade. Have ready a ½ pound of round steak or chuck, fully trimmed so that there's no fat or gristle. And this should be weighed after trimming. Put the beef into the work bowl and put a ½ pound of chicken breast. This is skinless and boneless chicken breast that you've cut into about 1-inch pieces. And the meat should be well chilled. And I found that if the meat is well chilled, you'll get a very good chop. And to chop the meat, pulse about 10 to 15 times. And you should stop to scrape the work bowl after every few pulses just to make sure that all the meat is really being treated equally. This is the same technique you would use if you were going to make chopped hamburger or meatloaf. So any kind of meat chopping maneuver, this is the technique. And you want this meat to be finely chopped. So as you look through the top of the machine, just check the consistency of the meat. And that looks just fine. You want tiny, tiny pieces. Then you should increase the heat to medium-high and add this chopped beef and chicken to the skillet. And then you want to stir and cook this over this medium-high heat, tossing fairly frequently just until the beef and chicken lose their pink color. Boy, this is really smelling good right now. When the meat has lost its pink color, increase the heat to high. Add 1 cup of dry white wine or dry white imported French vermouth, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/8 teaspoon of pepper, and a teaspoon of salt. Stir everything together well. Bring the mixture to the boil, and then you'll want to cook it over high heat for about 5 to 10 minutes until the wine is almost completely absorbed by the meat and vegetables. When the wine's absorbed, then add 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. Stir the mixture together and remove the pan from heat just momentarily. And then go back to the processor, put the metal blade in place, and add one pound can of Italian plum tomatoes in their juice. Pulse 4 times. And this just chops the tomatoes coarsely. And then return the pan to heat and secure the blade in place from below with a finger. And then you add these tomatoes right to the meat mixture. Then I'm going to go right back to the processor with the metal blade in place, add a second can of tomatoes to the work bowl, pulse again 4 times, and then I'm going to add these tomatoes to the sauce just a little bit later. I have found that if you add about half the tomatoes at a time to the sauce, and you let each addition thicken the sauce slightly, that you get a fresher tasting sauce than if you add all of the tomatoes at one time. So that's why I'm doing it in 2 additions. Stir everything well. Let it cook over medium-high heat for about 5 to 10 minutes until the mixture is slightly thickened. I'm just going to pretend that that has happened. Add the second can of tomatoes and also a teaspoon or 2 of sugar. You'll have to start with one and then see if it needs the other. Stir very well, and then let the mixture simmer until it is slightly thickened and has reduced to about 6 cups. And I have a batch of sauce sitting right next to this batch for comparison, so you can see that this is kind of liquidy, and this is nice and thick. And then you should taste to make sure that it is seasoned to your liking. You can make this way ahead of time. It improves on standing. You can make it ahead and freeze it. It'll make enough for about 6 servings, and this is particularly attractive served with spinach pasta. Cold sesame chicken is a spicy dish with a lot of garlic. It's kind of a sweet, sour flavor. You should make it several hours ahead to allow flavors to blend, and I want to show you right now how you prepare the chicken for the dish. Take some boneless chicken breasts. You will need a ½ pound of boneless and skinless chicken breasts, which means about 2 half breasts. Lay the breast former skin side down on a sheet of plastic, and then fold the ends over towards the middle, just as I'm doing here. And then you use this plastic wrap to aid you to roll this breast into a cylinder, a very compact cylinder. And then you can stick the cylinder into the freezer until the breast is totally solidly frozen. Then bring it back partially to room temperature until it's partially frozen. I'm going to drop this on the counter so you can hear that this is indeed still frozen, but it feels firm to your fingers and it will pass the knife test. So watch as I put this knife right through the chicken breast, and it goes through with just a little bit of resistance. So you need a ½ pound of these breasts. I have 2 of them here, and make sure that the breast passes the knife test. That way it'll be perfect for slicing with the 3 or 4 millimeter slicing disc. There, a little bit of effort. Then, with the slicing disc in place, load the breast pieces into the feed tube vertically so that they will stay upright, and then process with firm pressure. There. And you see how beautifully they slice. They all go in, and then they all come out just perfectly sliced. Then, with paper towels, quickly wipe the inside of your work bowl. And then once the work bowl is wiped, you're ready to proceed with processing the scallions. So put the same slicing disc in place. Load a bunch of scallions. This is about 6 scallions weighing 4 ounces. I'm leaving this rubber band around them to keep them vertical. And process with a medium pressure. And don't be concerned about the rubber band, because in this case it got stuck in the feed tube. It did not go through. So you don't have to take the rubber band off. Transfer the scallions to a bowl, and then we will attend to the scallions much later. If you are going to be making this way ahead of time, such as a day ahead of time, I would recommend that you wrap the scallions up and refrigerate them so they don't dry out. Then have ready a quart of boiling water. Add these chicken slices directly to this boiling water and stir them and cook them for just about a minute until the chicken is just opaque, which means that it's just cooked through. While the chicken's cooking, let me tell you how to cook the pasta. You will need 12 ounces of fresh pasta, cut about 1/8 of an inch thick. Drop the pasta into boiling water. Cook it. If it's really fresh pasta, it'll take about a minute to cook. And drop it into boiling water and then drain it thoroughly after it's cooked until it feels al dente, which means slightly firm to the bite. And then you plunge it into a bowl of cold water so that it's cooled thoroughly. And then after it's thoroughly cooled, you drain it again and you put it into a plastic bag or a bowl and mix it up with 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. And then that way the pasta can be made way ahead of time, and then you can refrigerate it until you're ready to use it in the dish. So here's the chicken. Let me go get the pasta. I'm going to add the pasta directly to this chicken. And then just stir everything together just briefly. And then get this out of the way while I make that spicy sauce that I was telling you about. With a metal blade in place, start the motor and drop in 3 large cloves of garlic. This is one of those dishes where if you're serving it to company, this is a perfect company dish. You want to make sure that all of you eats it so that you can stand to be around one another. So 3 large cloves of garlic go in just until they're finely minced, which means you can no longer hear any chopping sounds. A 1/2 cup of tahini, and this tahini looks like peanut butter. What it is sesame butter. It's sesame paste made from roasted sesame seeds that are ground. You can get them in supermarkets and also in health food stores. 1/2 cup of chicken stock, a tablespoon of sugar, a tablespoon of sesame oil. Remember, you mix 1 tablespoon of sesame oil with the pasta, and here's another tablespoon that goes in. 1/3 cup of soy sauce, and also a 1/3 cup of red wine vinegar. And we'll process this for about 15 seconds. And this is an absolutely wonderful marinade. You can use this as a salad dressing if you wish. It is so good. Then pour this over the pasta and the chicken. And even though this is not a cooked dish, it is smelling just absolutely wonderful. Toss everything together really well, and at this point what you want to do is cover the dish and let it marinate. Let the chicken and the pasta marinate together for about 2 hours at least in the refrigerator, but it can sit for several days. I'm kind of in a hurry, so I'm going to turn this mixture out. If you let this sit in the refrigerator, all of this sauce gets absorbed by the pasta and the chicken. You turn this out onto a large serving platter, and then you have ready 2 tablespoons of toasted sesame seed. And then you take your scallion or green onion, and then you arrange a border around it. Then you can cover this whole thing, let it chill thoroughly, and then bring it out when you're ready to serve. And this will serve 8 to 10 people. So that's how you make pasta with the food processor and those 2 delicious dishes. Bolognese sauce with beef, chicken, and ham, and that oriental spicy dish that's served cold. Cold sesame chicken with noodles. Enjoy them. This is Greg Patent wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.